The morning rush at the cafe was always the same. Clinking cups, the hiss of milk steamers, and the constant rhythm of footsteps across the tile floor. It was noisy, chaotic, and alive. For Sophie, it was home. At 22, Sophie had worked at Marion's cafe for almost 3 years. She loved the smell of roasted beans that clung to her apron and the feeling of sunlight breaking through the window as she balanced a tray of cappuccinos with practiced grace, her blonde, curly hair brushed just past her shoulders, framing a face that could flash a smile even when she was running late with orders. Sophie had always been friendly. Sometimes too friendly, as her boyfriend liked to remind her. She joked easily with regulars, laughed at harmless comments, and made everyone feel noticed. It wasn't flirting to her. It was part of who she was. Her warmth filled the room. Her boyfriend Ethan didn't see it that way. They had met a year earlier at a friend's party. Ethan was a year older, tall, quiet, with dark eyes that seemed to watch everything. At first, his calm made Sophie feel safe. He wasn't like the loud, reckless boys she'd dated in college. He listened. He noticed her. But as the months passed, that attentiveness shifted into something sharper. He began asking small questions that didn't sound like questions at all. "Who was that guy you were laughing with today? Don't you think it's a little much? Smiling like that for tips?" At first, Sophie brushed it off. "You're being silly," she'd say, kissing him on the cheek. "They're customers. It's just my job." The cafe closed late on Fridays. Sophie would often stay after hours to clean up, humming quietly as she stacked chairs and wiped down tables. The street outside would grow still, the hum of the city fading into distant murmurs. Sometimes one of the delivery drivers, usually a friendly older man named Tom, would stop by to chat while picking up supplies for the next morning. Sophie liked the company. It kept her from feeling alone in the quiet shop. One night, as she left the cafe, she found Ethan waiting for her outside, leaning against his car. His expression was tight. "Who is that guy?" he asked, before she could even say hello. Sophie blinked. "Tom, the delivery driver." "He's 50, Ethan." Ethan gave a short laugh, but it wasn't amused. "You looked pretty cozy." Her hands tightened around her purse strap. "You're being paranoid. I was just talking." "Yeah, you always are." That night ended in silence. Ethan drove her home, his jaw clenched, his fingers tapping on the steering wheel the entire way. Sophie stared out the window, feeling something shift inside her. A tiny crack that hadn't been there before. "You know what it's like, Sophie," he'd say. "Guys stare. You could at least make it easier for me." Sometimes she'd laugh to diffuse the tension. Other times she'd argue until both were exhausted. But the cycle always ended the same way. Ethan apologizing, Sophie forgiving him, and life slipping back to normal for a while. Yet something in her was dimming. She still smiled at customers, but her laughter came less easily. She stopped wearing bright lipstick. Her curls, once full and wild, were often tied up in a loose bun now. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. Sophie had just finished her shift when Ethan arrived to pick her up. He was unusually cheerful, which made her cautious. "I made appointments for us," he said as she slid into the car. "Thought it'd be nice to do something together." "Appointments?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, haircuts. You've been saying you wanted a trim, right?" Sophie hesitated. She had mentioned it once, weeks ago. "I guess," she said, smiling uncertainly. "That's thoughtful." Ethan squeezed her hand. "You'll love it. Trust me." The words should have felt comforting. Instead, they left a strange chill in her chest. The salon smelled of shampoo, hair dye, and warm air. Familiar and oddly comforting at first. Sophie followed Ethan inside, her heels clicking softly against the tile. The place was busy but not crowded, a hum of blow dryers and quiet chatter filling the room. Sophie had been to hairdressers before. She liked the ritual, the gentle tug of brushes through her curls, the faint tickle of scissors against her scalp. The small thrill of seeing her reflection transform, she had never imagined that today would feel different. Ethan led her to a chair near the center of the room. The stylist, a young woman with short black hair, greeted them politely and gestured to the striped PVC barber cape hanging on the hook. "Ready for your cut?" the stylist asked brightly. Sophie hesitated, glancing at Ethan. He was smiling, but there was a tightness around his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Yes, I guess," she said. The stylist draped the cape over her shoulders, securing it around her neck. The shiny stripes felt cold against her skin. Sophie tried to relax, reminding herself that this was just a haircut, that she was in a salon, surrounded by professionals. Ethan stayed close, hovering at the edge of her vision. Sophie felt his presence like a shadow, a silent weight pressing against her chest. Then he spoke. "I think it's time for something drastic," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried a note of command that made Sophie freeze. "What do you mean?" she asked, heart tightening. "You've been looking at other men too much," he said. "It's not acceptable. You need a fresh start." Sophie laughed nervously. "Ethan, this isn't funny." But he didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded to the stylist, who hesitated, glancing at Sophie. "What? What are you doing?" Sophie's voice quavered. "I'm making sure we both get what we need," Ethan said. "You'll thank me later." Sophie's stomach sank. She reached for his arm. "No, please don't do this." Ethan shook his head. "It's necessary. You need to see what it feels like, to start over." The stylist began by lifting Sophie's curls, running the clippers gently at first, but it didn't feel gentle to Sophie. The buzzing sound filled the room, loud and insistent, as strands of hair fell to the floor. Sophie felt her throat tighten, the panic rising. "I said no, stop, please," she cried. Her hands flew up, gripping the cape, her fingers trembling. Ethan's jaw tightened, his dark eyes locked on hers. "It's okay," he said softly. "Just relax. You'll be fine." But Sophie didn't feel fine. The sound of clippers, the cold touch of the cape against her shoulders, the smell of hair falling away. It all made her feel trapped, powerless. "Please," she begged again, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want this. I can't, please." The stylist hesitated, glancing at Ethan. He simply nodded, almost imperceptibly. With a deep breath, the stylist continued, and Sophie felt the first wave of curls slide off her head. Her hair, which had always been her pride, her beauty, her signature, disappeared in moments. She felt exposed, violated in a way that went beyond words. Every lock of hair that fell onto the floor felt like a piece of herself being stripped away. She wept openly, sobs shaking her shoulders beneath the striped cape. The salon smelled of hair, sweat, and fear. Sophie felt humiliated, trapped in a nightmare she hadn't chosen. Ethan's presence was oppressive. He didn't reach for her, didn't soothe her. He just watched. And in his silence, Sophie understood the truth. This was about his jealousy, his need for control, not love. The stylist moved carefully, shaving the remaining strands from the nape of Sophie's neck, across her temples, over the crown of her head. Sophie felt every vibration of the clippers against her scalp, every flick of hair against her bare skin. Her tears mixed with the cold metal of the chair's armrest as she whispered hoarsely, Why are you doing this?" Ethan leaned in. "Because it's the only way you'll learn. You'll see the world differently now." Sophie shook her head violently, her sobs louder now, echoing through the salon. Other clients and stylists looked on, averted eyes and murmurs filling the space around her. She felt both exposed and invisible. When the last strands fell, Sophie touched her bare scalp. The warmth of her hair was gone, replaced by the cold reality of what had happened. She could feel the tiny prickles, the roughness, and the unfamiliar weightlessness of her head. She hated the sensation. She hated him. She hated herself for ever trusting him. Ethan watched silently, a faint satisfaction in his expression. Sophie's tears burned, her chest heaving. She could hardly breathe, her mind a whirl of disbelief, anger, and grief. "Stop. Just stop," she whispered. "I can't. I won't." But it was done. There was no undoing it. Finally, the stylist removed the cape. Sophie looked in the mirror, her reflection almost unrecognizable. She saw a young woman, vulnerable, furious, and humiliated, with tears streaking her face and a completely bald head. The salon fell silent, the usual buzz of conversation replaced by the weight of the moment. Sophie couldn't speak. She couldn't even move at first. Then, with a shuddering breath, she pulled herself from the chair. She turned to Ethan, rage and despair colliding in her chest. You're insane," she spat, her voice shaking. "I can't believe you. I trusted you." Ethan's face remained calm, almost detached. "It's for the best," he said quietly. Sophie shook her head, staggering back. No, it's not. This is cruel. I won't." With that, she spun on her heel, tears blinding her, and fled the salon. Hair clippings clung to her bare shoulders, the cape crumpled in her hands. She ran to the street, the wind biting against her exposed scalp, the world spinning around her. For the first time in their relationship, Sophie didn't look back at him. She didn't even see his face as she disappeared into the city. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get away,